A disillusioned gamer found himself on an unfamiliar path, devoid of memory regarding his arrival. Progressing through an unusual encounter, he emerged in one of the most brutal sci-fi universes revered by geeks, the Imperium of Man, set in the grim darkness of the far future where there is only war, and inherited an identity with world-shattering secrets. Chapter 1 Into the Grimdark. I was walking down a long and winding road in a dense fog, the echoes of my footsteps my only companion. Strangely, I can't recall how I got here. The last thing I remember doing was reading another newly released FAQ document for one of my many armies of miniatures on my computer. Now that I think about it, I don't remember much of the details on that document either, only the vague residual feeling of annoyance from another wave of adjustments. These changes used to be exciting, but eventually, like most things in life, they ceased to be so. The world seemed to get grimmer as one aged. The thrill of gaming and the fickle glories it entailed faded to dust over the years. These thoughts were running through my mind as I continued to walk forward in a semi-consciousness state, and slowly a realization came to me. Wait, am I lucid dreaming? Being an indoors-type person all my life, the current scenario of walking down a long, winding road in a dense fog with no destination in mind just doesn't make any sense. What is going on here? I looked back, only to be greeted by the same road that disappeared into a fog that shrouded everything. I shrugged and continued forward. Something was compelling me to walk forward, and I got a feeling that answers would be found at the end of the road. This was beginning to look like a setup for a horror movie, but I felt at peace. The lone walk continued for a while until something was visible in the distance. There at the edge of the fog was the silhouette of a person. As I got closer, that person came into view. Okay, I thought to myself, I must be lucid dreaming. Appearing out from the dense fog was the prettiest girl I had seen in my life. As someone who had spent a large chunk of my time surfing the internet and as a result, got bombarded with an endless stream of advertisements and media featuring pretty ladies, it was a really tall order to top that list. She was a girl about 165 centimeters in height, and underneath a head of straight flowing platinum hair was a face of idealized perfection, and a simple yet elegant-looking white robe completed her angelic look. She had this paradoxical quality about her that made guessing her age an impossible task, looking youthful yet ancient at the same time. "Hello," I said, not sure what to expect from this encounter. She stood perfectly still, observing me with her large, soulful silver eyes and a dead neutral expression. After a period of awkward silence, she performed a hand gesture I recognized, but least expected to see in these most unusual of circumstances. It was the hand sign of Aquila, a universal greeting gesture of humans in the grimdark universe of which as a hobby I had invested too much time and resources into. I really have to cut back my spending on that front, I thought to myself. Evidently, even my rare occasion of a lucid dream had elements of that universe seeping in. Flustered, I responded in the only way that made sense to me by making an Aquila sign myself. There I was, responding to a very pretty girl by making a geeky hand gesture on a road surrounded by dense fog. It was very surreal. We stayed like that for a while, maintaining the Aquila hand gesture while looking at each other. Finally, she seemed to have made a decision and reached out to me with her right hand. "So we are playing handshake now?" I obliged and took her hand. It felt soft and cold. Her expression softened and she closed her eyes. I had no idea what she was up to, but since this seemed like a dream, I was not about to refuse any chance of skin contact with an attractive potential target. Suddenly a distinctive feeling came to me as if I was being asked specifically for permission to know more about me. While this lucid dream was getting weirder by the minute, it was not unpleasant. So I said, "Yes, let's get to know each other better." Immediately after that, the mysterious girl seemed to glow with a soft, radiant light. "All right, this is getting too weird," I concluded and tried to let go of her hand, but she held on tight. She opened her eyes, and to my surprise, they now glowed with a faint golden light. Then she spoke for the first time and made the most ridiculous statement I ever heard in my life. "Help me," she said, her voice a whisper, "help me and the others. In exchange, my abilities, my body, and my soul are yours." I was like, "Whoa, young lady. We just met. We don't know each other and have yet to even exchange names." Talk about instant escalation. I tried to let go of her hand again, but stopped after having another proper look at her face. She was dead serious and seemed so full of sincerity it made me pause. I knew the old saying, never stick it into crazies. Even a 12 out of 10 won't be worth the endless troubles ahead, but I felt torn between refusing or accepting to help a pretty stranger. I hesitated again, but by then her golden glowing eyes started to well up. "Hey, this is unfair. I am weak against this type of attack. It was then my logical mind proposed listening to her first. Maybe, just maybe, for once in my unfulfilling life I could be a hero for a fair maiden. After all, this is a dream, right? Sighing, I said, "All right, I will do what I can to help. You promise?" She asked. "I promise." 2 streaks of tears went down her lovely cheeks. "Darn," she cried anyway. "I am sorry," she said. "This is the second time I cried in my life." Well, that was oddly specific but hardly possible. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to switch the topic. "SYRINE," she answered, now beaming with a bewitching smile so bright it seemed to break the fog apart. I must admit, this surreal scene of a radiant, pretty young lady smiling and crying at the same time during a heavy fog was mesmerizing. "Thank you," SYRINE finally said. Her next words hit me with a wave of foreboding and farewell. My world exploded, a flash of white light swallowing everything. SYRINE, the fog and the road were no more. Up and down, space and time became irrelevant as I battled the worst case of vertigo I experienced in my life. In the blinding white light, I felt myself moving forward, slowly at first, gaining speed gradually. Without any distinguishable means of locomotion, I was being pulled forward towards something or someplace. After that, my world became nothing but pure blinding white. The world of pure white receded. When my vision finally came back, it was all blurry and took me some time to realize a person was standing in front of me. I could not see properly yet, but it was definitely a female. Was it SYRINE? Darn it, girl, you should have warned me of that. I reached out with my hand, feeling disorientated from the experience. A gloved hand caught my arm to stabilize me, and someone I guessed was the owner of it was saying something, but I couldn't catch any of it. After I gained my footing, my vision and hearing slowly returned. Then I saw it. In front of me was a person wearing a rather faithful replica suit of power armor belonging to the famous Adeptus Sororitas, aka Sisters of Battle. My jaw almost dropped as I got a clearer look. The number of details and material quality was leagues beyond any attempt I have seen in photos or real life. A low humming can even be heard coming from the supposed power backpack generator. Really nice details. The wearer of this fine suit was not SYRINE. This new lady here was quite young, probably just over 20. There was this perfect mix of youthfulness and soldiery about her, a perfect candidate for a perfectly faithful replica of what a battle sister should look like in real life. She was a pretty brunette, but a far cry from the previous girl I met. No offense to any ladies who had cosplayed as a sister of battle, but compared to this fine work of art in front of me, all previous renditions would just be crude imitations in comparison. My only critique would be that the color scheme of her suit was too lazy. Just dull silver overall with elements of white cloth finished by golden embroidery decoration. I laughed a little inside at all this. First an Aquila lady, then a Sister of Battle cosplayer? Well, at least this lucid dream was consistent in its theme. Expecting to be in a geeky convention setup of sorts, I looked around. We were in a dimly lit large chamber with unconventional futuristic decoration. We were standing on an elevated end of the chamber. I could see a slight slope going down. Nice place. But the lighting was not optimal for a photo session. More battle sisters were seen scattered around the chamber. I counted 10. They were all wearing the same color scheme but had less decorated power armor. The thing that struck me was none of them was laughing, having fun, or doing any sort of goofy selfie-taking activities one would typically expect to see in a convention. The brunette sister in front of me, who must be the leader of this bunch, was looking at me with a concerned face. An uneasy feeling welled up inside me. They all looked far too serious for this to be in a squad cosplay session, and the way they were handling their supposedly prop bolters exuded a type of practiced ease that can only be the result of countless hours of drills and training. Something buzzed. The leader-looking sister said a single word. Contact. It was not English nor any other language I knew, but somehow I could understand it. The eerie implication of it almost made my skin crawl. The air tensed up. Everybody either donned their helmets or closed the visor of their helmets. The pretty brunette was the last to put hers on. It was a more decorated variant that had a huge chrome-finished fleur-de-lis symbol on the forehead. I observed up close the reflective sheen on the helmet in the dim light, the complicated light refraction on the helmet's lens pieces, and the weight of it as it slid down to completely cover her head. This is no prop, I realized, and my skin crawled. There was a commotion happening at the far entrance of the chamber. 2 people ran in. But the sisters did not react and let the 2 cross half the chamber hide behind a cover piece. Sounds of footsteps came thundering down from the entrance. From the shadow, a mob erupted into the chamber. I watched in disbelief as a horde of gunmen rushed towards us with their guns blazing, their silhouettes lit up by muzzle flashes. In an instant, the serenity of the chamber was shattered by deafening gunfire. Tracers and lost bolts filled the air. My faintest hope that this was all some elaborate prank shattered after I witnessed the shower of plaster and shattering of stonework in the wake of weapons impact. Amongst the cacophony of weapons discharging were some louder, heavier sounds followed by actual explosions that landed far off their mark, but close enough to make me wince and feel their impact. Heavy weapons. The mob had heavy weapons and soon they will have the time to aim. This lucid dream had officially turned into a nightmare. Chapter 2 Gunfight. I wanted to scream. There was a gunfight happening right in front of me. This supposed lucid dream session was turning into a real nightmare. Being a lazy pacifist who resided in a relatively peaceful country all my life, I had never been anywhere near a gunfight, let alone a gunfight involving futuristic heavy weapons. But no voice came out from my throat. Weird messages kept appearing in my vision. Regulus, action override. Regulus, action override. Regulus, action override. Protect the Holy Daughter. The leader-looking sister ordered and tackled me. The Holy Daughter who? No time for any question. We went down on the floor just as another round of enemy fire was let loose. Everything seemed to be in slow motion. I could see the tracer fire flying past above me and actual bolter rounds flying and spinning in the air. Wait a second. The world around me really did slow down to a crawl. In a mind-numbing state, I began to look around. Everything around me appeared in exquisite detail. It was only then I noticed the new messages that had appeared in my vision. Combat detected. Cogitatio acceleratio auto-activated. Auspex auto-activated. Then the most peculiar thing happened. I felt an expansion of energy burst forth from my body to the surroundings. As the energy expanded forward, scanning everything on its path, I gained a clear understanding of the chaos around me. An indescribable feeling of clarity reached my mind, and I could read the whole battle as easily as the back of my hand. We were cornered but benefited from cover and elevation. 11 battle sisters with 3 fighters of unknown origin against 35 enemies, 2 of which were enormous. I froze at the distinctive silhouettes of the 2 giants amongst the hostiles. No mistake about it, mixed within the mass of incoming gunmen and towering amongst them were the familiar shapes of hulking armored individuals with huge pauldrons. This setting, this universe, these can only be the transhuman space marines. As a longtime player myself on the Grimdark tabletop miniature game, I personally had over 100 space marines under my collection and instantly recognized these as the main threats. As if the situation wasn't dire enough, one of the hostile marines was holding a weapon that looked too large to be carried by a human, a heavy bolter. The other marine was barking orders. As he did so in slow motion, one of his minions with a flamethrower stepped forward towards 2 of our fighters that were hiding behind a cover. Flamer! I screamed internally at the hapless duo who were about to be doused by fire. Then the time dilation effect stopped. The cacophony of a close-quarter gunfight hit me like a truck. Real-life gunfire was much louder than I had ever imagined. My ears were hurting as I felt the resonance of the discharge of every weapon near me. The sound of firearms being fired indoors had a distinct quality to it. They hit you like a solid hammer. Again, I wanted to scream. Again, that message appeared. Regulus, action override. I tried to slow down my breathing, only to discover I was breathing at a normal pace. What is this? My mind was a mess, but my body was calm. The incongruity made me dizzy. Suddenly, another weird sensation came to me. Mixed within the chaos of the gunfight was a distinct pattern calling. 01011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100 preparing to gunfight. A shower of shattered stonework pulled me back to the immediate threats near me. A deafening amount of gunfire was pouring from the enemy's side, to be answered by distinctively fewer but heavier guns from around me. Bolters. The sisters were shooting bolters. One can clearly hear the gun caliber difference by the sound they made. Regardless, lucid dream or not, I need to get away from here. Then an inconvenient truth came to me. I realized that except for a large blast door a short distance behind us, the hostiles had blocked the only way in and out of this chamber. I knew this from the scanning action earlier. Every inch of the chamber was pictured clearly in my head. I could see and rotate it in my mind's eye with absolute clarity. But was this information true? Can I try to do the scanning action again to confirm? I need to see it again, to confirm if there was really no other place to run. What was it called again? Auspex, was it? Come on, come on. My consciousness expanded in the next second. Auspex activated. Another blast of scanning energy expanded forward. With my readings, I saw the battle from a god's eye view. The duo that was approached by the enemy flamer had relocated further back. The piece of cover they were hiding behind just a moment ago was in flames. I wondered if they had heard my warning. The enemy flamer had garnered himself a lot of attention. Soon he was fed with a dozen bolter rounds and exploded into a huge fireball. The blinding flash and explosion robbed me of my hearing. Nothing but constant ringing in my ears. But I could still see the enemies from the residual readings from my last scan. Banking on the new experience, I tried to do the same action as before. Hostile, 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 hostile with a grenade launcher. I marked out the closest batch of enemies and tried to project their positions to the people on my side. To my amazement, the Battle Sisters switched from random suppression to discipline, burst zeroing in on the targets I marked in the smoke-filled chamber. The first enemy to go down was the grenade launcher user. He was standing around, apparently still dazed by the fireball. A bolter round lodged into his head and blew it off like a watermelon hit by a speeding truck. The rest of his marked companions soon followed his fate. The unfortunate gunmen briefly danced like ragdolls as they were hit by a hail of bolter rounds. Then they literally exploded, showering blood and body parts freely before fading from my readings. I wanted to vomit. The air had a hint of metallic taste added to it now. Deprived of sight and sound, I became conscious of the stank of blood and sweat. 010101010101010101010101010101010101010101010101010101010. That calling came again, but I was too occupied with making myself small behind cover. Despite the good opening for the fight, we were still outnumbered and pinned down by the sheer volume of incoming hostile fire. Fortunately, high ground and solid cover proved to be our salvation as the enemies struggled to utilize their advantage to end us. With teary eyes, I risked a quick peek and saw them advancing through their fallen ranks, the Space Marines pushing the rest forward through the smoke and dust. This was bad, very bad. I need to do the scanning trick again. Auspex activated. For the third time, I sent forth an expanding detection net to mark the enemies. Hostile, 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 another hostile with a grenade launcher that was sending grenades over at my current location. Grenades were flying over here. At the same time, a corner of my mind registered the hostile Space Marine aiming his heavy bolter at me. My mind went blank. Get down. The leading sister appeared from nowhere and pushed me down, covering me with herself from impending death. Totally helpless, I closed my eyes and waited for impact. After being subjected to the loudest sound I have heard in my life, I expected the worst and opened my eyes only to see dust all around. Miraculously, all my limbs seemed to be still in their respective places in contrast to the piece of life-saving cover that had been blown clear by heavy fire. The sister who saved my life was still on top of me but appeared hurt and was groaning from unseen injuries. How I escaped from that unscathed but the power-armored sister didn't was beyond me. The gunfight raged on all around. It appeared the heavy bolter Marine was directing his wrath elsewhere at the moment after being shot by other sisters. We have to move, now. I thought and pushed the sister. She fell over with surprising ease, considering she was wearing power armor and the full weight it entailed. Then I saw it. My hands, these weren't my hands. I panicked and looked down at myself for the first time in a while due to all the happenings. Instead of my usual t-shirt, I saw a white robe. What in the world? A loud clang was heard behind me. I turned and saw that the sealed blast door was opened. Grotesque figures were pouring out. Tracked monstrosities with human-looking torsos rolled out one after another with huge guns blazing from where their arms were supposed to be. At the forefront of the newcomers was a ginormous figure, far larger even than the Space Marines below, and it was rushing towards me, non-human legs carrying it across the floor with astonishing speed. It opened and stretched its many arms. I saw a multitude of weapons and guns hanging on some of it. So this is GG. I expected death or the end of a dream and closed my eyes. But neither came, so I looked up. A huge hooded figure was in front of me. It had positioned itself to block any incoming fire from the hostile gunmen below, its many hands extended to form a shield around me. The palms of all the hands were metallic, but shaped into distinct human-like appendages. 010101111001111001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100110011001100 Finally, its meaning reached me. The binary canicle faded, and a name appeared in my mind. SYRINE, the hooded figure, was directly addressing me. Where its eyes would be were several huge lenses. On all their reflections I could see but a single person, the Aquila young lady I met at the long, winding, foggy road. Chapter 3 Archtech Priest Dominus. A hand was reaching out, trying to touch the many reflections of a pretty lady on the many lenses belonging to a metallic monstrosity. It was a very delicate-looking hand with fair, flawless skin ending with really feminine fingers and the final touches of perfect, methodically kept nails. It was not my hand, but yet it seemed to obey my every command. Every little twitch of fingers, any slight turning of the palm was reflected in those lenses. That hand never reached said lenses. A metallic appendage that was shaped into a perfect imitation of a human hand intercepted it. I felt the coldness of the metallic palm. Despite its outward human form, the hardness of its surface confirmed its non-organic nature. No signs of external injuries, but I detected your brainwave to be 70.865% deviant from your standard pattern. Are you well, SYRINE? This thing was asking me questions in binary beeps. How was I able to understand binary? Nothing made sense anymore, but the reflections on the monster's lenses told a cold truth, for reasons beyond my comprehension. I am SYRINE now. Then a realization struck me like lightning. This metallic monstrosity is acquainted with the Aquila lady. What if it learned I was not the real SYRINE, but someone else who just took over? Severe stress took over, and total panic was just a hair's breadth away. I needed answers and a way out. Do I have anything to fool this monster just for a while? Information. I need information. Do I know anything about it? Anything? Anything? Severe stress detected. Cogitatio acceleratio auto-activated. The world slowed again. The gunfight was still raging on but seemed so distant in the background. Another line of words appeared in my vision. Run Analytica? Yes/no. With almost teary eyes I looked at the prompt. Is this salvation? Yes. Readings popped up in my mind displaying information for the monster before me. Name, Cryptorecycle, Posthuman, Archtech Priest Dominus. I remembered now. This ginormous grotesque cyborg was definitely looking the part for an Adeptus Mechanicus Tech Priest Dominus. His overall appearance resembled a hooded and hunched gigantic man with multiple pairs of robotic arms. One of his many hands was carrying the signature omniscient axe of his order. Over what was left of his body was a hooded robe that was typical for a tech priest, and completing the package were his non-human legs, which looked like a combination of inverted claws dangling with a bundle of random wires. On his back, a myriad of antennas and unknowable instruments stuck like pikes. The release of the Adeptus Mechanicus plastic range was a relatively new event compared to a lot of the armies of the Grimdark universe. If I recall correctly, the initial start collecting box package was a particularly generous offer. In my zeal to quickly start up the army, I bought multiple boxes and ended up with a few redundant copies of Tech Priest Dominus figures laying around. As for those tracked monstrosities with human torsos and huge guns as arms around the Tech Priest, they were a mix of heavy combat units of the Adeptus Mechanicus known as Cataphron Breachers and Destroyers. These killing machines came in an expensive kit of 3 per box during release and were spammed by the power gamers. But enough reminiscing about my hobby. The current situation needs to be resolved. Digging hard into my mind, I reviewed my options given the absurdity of the current circumstances. Betting on the information gained from the reading, I started by saying his name, Crypto. I flinched at my own voice when it came out and did not manage to finish speaking his name. Unlike the one I was used to for decades, the voice that came out from me was elegant and feminine, and it startled me. Old Crypto is here for you, omniscient princess. Please tell me, are you hurt or experiencing any discomfort? He can't. Not finishing saying his name was kinda a jackpot? Apparently, SYRINE was close enough to the tech priest to address him with a shortened name. Calling him by his full name might actually arouse suspicion that something was amiss. That was close, too close. But the next part made me shiver internally. I need to speak in low Gothic. If this was my old body, I swore I would have been sweating by the buckets. But there was no going back. The tech priest was waiting for me. One way or another, this charade will end with or without my answer, and I rather take an active bet. I had a hunch as earlier when the sister spoke in the language, its meaning came automatically to me, so I dug deep into my mind for the low Gothic tongue. As if answering my prayer, the language suddenly bubbled into my head, and the words came naturally to me. Putting in as much anguish as I could, I pushed them out. Where am I? My head is hurting. There, I said it in fluent low Gothic. To complete the act, I lowered my head to avoid his gaze and put my other hand on top of my head. The tech priest Dominus made a sound that was halfway between gasping and machine gear grinding to a halt. A slight pause later, a single word escaped his vocal synthesizer. Unacceptable. It was a crispy metallic voice laced with hints of age. I tensed up and waited, not knowing what would happen next. Wordlessly, he raised his massive omniscient axe and struck the ground twice with its end knob. Heavy resonance echoed throughout the whole chamber. All the breachers and destroyers stopped firing their weapons on his cue. The tech priest then turned his back to me to face the chamber, standing tall to his full imposing height and completely blocking my view. Then he roared. Unforgivable! Inconceivable! You dare? You dare. None of you, not a single one of your misbegotten kind, are even worth her single brain cell. The volume of his words, amplified many times by overcharged vocal synthesizer, drowned out all the combined sound in the chamber, and everything paused. There the arch-tech priest Dominus stood tall at the edge of the elevated platform. He was looking down at all the hostile forces below like an apex predator surveying a herd of helpless lambs, one of his many hands pointing an accusing finger at them. I gasped internally at his blatant taunting at an armed and hostile crowd. Hey, we are still in a gunfight. You are asking to be shot. As expected, since he made himself stand out so much, the tech priest soon attracted a whole lot of hostile fire, but he was completely unfazed as an energy field flickered to life around him to block most of the incoming fire. Small rings of light flashed on each impact on his protective energy field, making it a dazzling sight even when viewed from behind. The geek inside me cried out with joy and disbelief at the sight of a supposedly physically impossible force field in action. However, it appeared to not be foolproof, as some rounds did make it through. However, those lucky shots merely bounced off him like rain hitting a stone wall. It was then I recalled the tech priest Dominus has some of the best defensive stat lines in the miniature game, outperforming even the premium power armor the Imperium provided for its elites, and I was merely witnessing that stat line performance live in action. With all eyes in the chamber on him, the tech priest continued, as a devout believer of the glorious Omnisia, I apologize for my unsightly outburst of emotion. He bowed and waved one of his many hands, dropping judgment with a voice cold with contempt. Now, I consign all you unworthy unbelievers to eternal entropy. As when every breacher and destroyer fired their heavy weapons, I realized with horror the tech priest must have done some serious trajectory calculations for his killing machines when he was trash-talking just now. For an undetermined amount of time, an endless stream of deadly shining projectiles was homing to the enemies below, and a scene of butchery happened right before my eyes. Cries of defiance soon turned into despair. Returning hostile fire dwindled, then fell silent, and finally the Mechanicus heavy combat units ceased firing. I took a peek at the carnage and saw the aftermath of the onslaught. Down there was a scene of sheer brutality. Scores of charred mass vaguely resembling human forms with twisted limbs littered all over the chamber. Some of them were still moving, but I was not sure if it was because they were still clinging to life or due to the random ammunition rounds and lost gun power packs that were still going off from the remnants of superheated weapon impact. The smell of ozone and burned meat filled the air. Wordlessly, the Battle Sisters started walking forward into the charnel house and executing anyone who might actually survive that hell. My civilian brain froze with the sight happening before me. Holy daughter. A female voice called to me. I turned and noticed the sister leader was behind me with her helmet removed. Blood was pouring down from the left side of her face. My brain started to move again. The scene of her courageously trying to shield me from grenade impact surfaced and made me instinctively look down at myself, only to see a flawlessly white robe, and my hands were lightly dusted but otherwise in pristine condition despite surviving grenade attacks and rolling on the ground. How was that even possible? I am all right. Thank you for saving me, but why do you call me Holy Daughter? It was the best reply I could come up with as my mind was a mangled mess. Further adding to the difficulties of my mental processing was the eerie sensation of talking in fluent low Gothic tongue which I have never learned. What the sister did next boggled my mind. She went down on one knee and knelt before me. Revered lady, I am Elysius Sabatif, probationary palatine of Order of the Shining Beacon. You must be the prophesied true daughter of the Emperor that he on Holy Terra has sent to lead us in our darkest hour. Please honor us with your leadership and wisdom. Guide our order and the people of Imperium in this testing time. I was rendered speechless. but she continued to speak. The uprising suppression is at a critical stage. Revered lady, please lead us. She looked up. Her face was a full display of hope and reverence, but my mind started numbing again with her revelation. Chapter 4. Nobody expects the uprising. I murmured. Overwhelmed by what was happening around me, I merely echoed what Palatine Alicia was saying. The truth was my mind had blanked out a while ago. Around me was this supposedly real version of the grimdark universe of the far future where I heavily invested in its miniature games as my hobby. I was awestruck by the sheer intensity of what I had seen, heard and felt. The smell of blood, sweat, gunpowder, ozone, and charred flesh in the air. The sound of each and every gut-wrenching bolter discharge as the sisters continued their grim work in the background executing armed thugs. Indescribable feelings rose inside me. A part of me wanted to shout awesome, for what must have been a wet dream for any fan of the grimdark universe, to be able to see and experience the universe itself in person. Another part of me just wanted to scream and hide from all these, as the very core appeal of this universe laid in the fact it was so utterly horrible and dystopian. And frankly, I wasn't sure this was a lucid dream session anymore. My mind just wasn't in the right state to answer the Palatine. Then someone cut into our conversation. This is no mere uprising. A deep and stern voice came somewhere behind. The owner of the voice walked up and appeared beside me, and immediately I knew who he was by appearance. Standing close to 6 feet tall was a man who looked to be in his mid-40s. He was fully geared up with a trench coat overall. On top of his head was a really solid-looking Capitaine brandishing a stylized eye on the center. Beneath the shadow cast by the Capitaine, a pair of blue eyes glittered with sharpness and wisdom. Overall, the man was handsome but slightly rough around the edges and had the look of a model who would most probably be hired to represent a certain classic tobacco brand back on Earth. However, unlike your run-the-mill models, this man exuded an air of unquestionable authority even just by standing still. Inquisitor, I said reflexively before realizing my mistake, and swiftly ran Analytica on the newcomer. The readings came back. Human, Inquisitor. Inquisitors are one of the highest-ranking agents of the Imperial Inquisition. Relentless and deadly, they are the most important arm of the Imperial government dedicated to ensuring the security of the Imperium of Man. Every Inquisitor in theory possesses near unlimited authority, thus most have access to an almost limitless variety of Imperial resources that allowed them to act against any threats they perceive to the Imperium. Think of them as a mix of James Bond and Judge Dredd with a blank check to carry out their missions. Unlike Cryptor or the Arch-Tech Priest Dominus, no name came back, which meant Thabris Thorn, Ordo Hereticus. He introduced himself and fixed a firm gaze on me. You would have to excuse me for skipping pleasantries. Quickly now, can you tell me who you are and what you are doing on this planet? Honored Inquisitor, the Palatine voiced her displeasure. I must protest the way you are addressing the revered lady, and what do you mean by saying this was no mere uprising? The man scoffed. First, before I can verify the outrageous claim you just mentioned, by the decree of the Holy Inquisition, everyone here will be under my personal scrutiny. Second, when has a simple planetary uprising ever involved renegade Astartes? He finished his statement by pointing somewhere below the platform we were all standing on. Astartes, aka Space Marines, were transhuman supersoldiers of the Imperium of Man. These genetically altered superhumans were usually clad in their signature power armor and engage in an endless battle with the horrors of the galaxy. Widely known as the poster boys of the grimdark universe. But these supposed guardians of humanity can go bad, becoming renegade or something much, much worse. Speaking of which, whatever happened to the 2 Space Marines that were present in the enemy rank? I followed where the Inquisitor was pointing and found the answer. The heavy bolter Marine ended up in a pile of rubble, apparently melted together with his choice of cover after being subjected to hails of direct plasma fire. His hands were still twitching as a sister executed him with point-blank shots through the helmet lenses. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more gruesome for the renegade Space Marine, another scene was unfolding, and it made my jaw drop. There, a short distance away, a dismembered figure of a giant armored man was being dragged along the ground by an unknown female figure clad in a skin-tight black operative suit. Her sudden appearance sent chills down my spine, as I had absolutely no idea when this person had entered the fray and chopped off all the limbs of a Space Marine. She was dragging the limbless renegade Marine towards us. Her every movement suggested highly trained lethality. From my knowledge of the grimdark universe, only one type of character fits her profile: an Officio Assassinorum operative or an Imperial assassin. Unlike all the operative miniatures I collected, she wore no headgear and exposed her pretty face to the world. The assassin was a cold, foxy beauty with her black hair tied into a warrior's knot that extended into a long ponytail. This seemed like a really popular hairstyle in the miniature range. As I was dazzled by her appearance and couldn't help myself from looking at her, she glanced back, sizing me up, making my core shivered with her stares. "Sir, target acquired." She addressed the Inquisitor and pushed the hapless Marine forward as if casually delivering a mailed package. "Right, we should get this done and over with." He nodded to her. The assassin did something to the Marine's armor and then yanked the helmet off them. Underneath the helmet was the face of a scarred warrior with a bald head, but thankfully no signs of chaos corruption. Massive amounts of blood was pouring all over the place, but it did not stop the Marine from dropping a tirade of profanity in low Gothic. "In the name of the God Emperor, do you repent and cooperate, Space Marine?" Thebris asked. The assassin held the Marine's head, so he was facing the Inquisitor. "Huh." The Marine snarled. "When my brothers arrive, they will give you all mortals a death not even worthy for street dogs." Then he spat, the classic acidic spit attack I read in the lore. As if anticipating this action, the assassin turned his head at the last second and his spit hit the floor and sounds of acid burning hissed on the spot. In a swift motion, she quickly followed up by dislocating his jaw to prevent further similar incidents. Now limbless and with a broken jaw, the Marine was making unintelligible angry sounds. It was at the same time the angriest and most helpless thing I have ever seen in my life. Not happy with his behavior, the assassin delivered some brutal palm strikes on the Marine's head to silence him with a knockout. "Now then," Thebris continued as if the events just now were an everyday occurrence. "Put him away. Shall we continue where we left off?" He turned his cold gaze and looked at me again. I wanted to take a step back, but my body couldn't move. All these individuals were just so casual about brutal violence. I had just witnessed more violence in person for the past hour than all my decades of peaceful life combined. A deep understanding of the laws of this universe was imprinted on me. Regardless of who you are here in this place, violent death can and will come to you any time should you cross the wrong people or be at the wrong place at the wrong time. That realization seemed to have triggered some primal level of fear inside me. My mind had reached the threshold for the emotion, but strangely my body did not tremble. But mentally I was utterly spent and just wanted to surrender, so I came clean with the Inquisitor. I can't seem to remember anything. I just know my name and recall that Dominus Cryptor is my acquaintance. The really surprising part of my statement was that my voice wasn't shaking, but inside I just wanted to cry. Well, judging by their reaction, that bombshell wasn't well received. The Inquisitor did not move and his expression could not be read, but that couldn't be a good thing. The sister had a surprised and devastated look on her face. Just as when it felt like things were about to explode, something buzzed. It was the same sort of sound I had heard a while ago. "This better be good," the Inquisitor said, but his mannerism indicated he was not speaking to me. As expected, he appeared to be listening to a Vox report via an earpiece and replied to someone a while later. "No mistake about it? Very well, keep me informed if anything changes." Thebris out. With that, his attention returned to me again, and his level of hostility rose. "Quit playing games, lady. Tell me what you did and why you did it." My patience has its limits, and the latest development just escalated the whole situation. This was bad. Really, really bad. My instinct was urging me to do the totally illogical action of running away. They all had guns, and the assassin was just beside me. I was on the very edge of a nervous breakdown when a voice of reason came to my rescue. Inquisitor Thorn, Archtech Priest Dominus Cryptor, stepped in, physically putting himself between me and the scary man. As the highest-ranking representative of the Adeptus Mechanicus on this planet, I formally request you not to further burden my main benefactor of this holy expedition. The Inquisitor turned to face the tech priest, and they started to stare down at each other. I gulped silently, looking at the two Imperial powerhouses. My old habit as a gamer kicked in, and I quickly deduced with a small comfort in the scenario if a fight indeed happened now. Cryptor and his killer machines had a slight edge over Thebris' side. It was Palatine Alicia who broke the stalemate. Honored Inquisitor and Dominus, due to the unfortunate incident just now, the revered lady might have suffered from amnesia or brain damage due to the impact of the direct grenade attack. I had shielded her as much as I could, but it might not have been enough. The sister said apologetically. Both the parties she addressed looked at her bloodied face and contemplated her statement. It was at this point more people came forward and gathered near us. It was 3 people, 2 men, and 1 woman who looked like what you would expect as the hired guns of the Inquisition. Thebris glanced at the group's most senior-looking individual, and the latter nodded, silently verifying Alicia's statement. Cryptor pointed at the impact craters near us and said, "Direct grenades impact. Even with her level of protection, there might be complications with her delicate condition of just finishing the activation rituals. Inquisitor Thorn, we should put aside my benefactor's curious case of memory loss under review for the moment. In the meantime, what is this latest development you speak of?" Dominus. The Inquisitor turned to face the tech priest. "I suppose my party does owe you gratitude for your cooperation on apprehending the renegade Astartes. As for that development," he said his next words slowly, "this will affect every Imperial subject in this sector. Billions and billions of souls are at stake. I was just informed by my crew that the Astronomicon can no longer be detected. The light of the Emperor is lost to us." Chapter 5, Sorting the Mess. The Astronomicon, a giant psychic beacon located on planet Earth, was the one thing that binds the Imperium of Man together in this grimdark universe. It was the symbol of unity both spiritually and literally for the galaxy-spanning Imperium of Man. Without the psychic light of the Astronomicon to guide the starships of the Imperium, faster-than-light warp travel between the vast distances of Imperial worlds would become so impractical the Empire would cease to function. Palatine Alicia gasped at the unspoken implications. "So we are cut off from any chance of outer reinforcements against what that renegade Marine mentioned was coming? Intriguing." Cryptor voiced his thoughts and turned to me. "Was that why you were so adamant about immediately activating this psychic beacon when we just arrived? Omniscient Princess? Wait, what? SYRINE did that? This place is the heart of a psychic beacon? And why the princess title?" The Dominus statement made everyone look straight at me, and of course, I didn't have the answer. My mind was flooded with an alarming amount of warning sirens from what I just heard. A psychic beacon alone was already a huge deal in its own right, plus the Astronomicon going offline now of all times. This had all the hallmarks of a world-ending event looming on the horizon. Severe stress detected. Cogitatio acceleratio auto-activated. It was then that the thought acceleration power automatically activated again. From my experience, every time it happened, I would have like 20 to 30 seconds of extremely dilated time to look around and organize my thoughts when it was just the blink of an eye in real time. From my brief respite, I realized my immediate concerns were not the doomsday scenario, but to bullshit myself out of this soft interrogation. Working on a hunch, I quickly ran Analytica on all the people around me to confirm something I noticed. As expected, only readings from Alicia, Cryptor, and Thabris came back with their respective names. The three newcomers that looked like inquisitorial hired guns and the Imperial Assassin all came back nameless but confirmed their human status, except for the Assassin. Her reading returned as transhuman, confirming my suspicion of her being an Officio Assassinorum operative. Deducing from what I knew, Cryptor and SYRINE were acquainted, and that was why the first, Analytica, readings returned with his name even though he had never mentioned it. Thabris' initial reading came back nameless, but the Inquisitor's name appeared on the second reading after his self-introduction. Likewise, Alicia's mannerisms definitely indicated this was the first time we met. By rounding out all the information gathered thus far, I saw an opening and tried my luck directing the conversation. "Crypto, you left me all alone during the activation ritual?" I asked, carefully tuning my voice to just the right mix between curiosity and outrage. My probing question made the Dominus jolted despite his massive size. "Allow me to explain," a seemingly agitated Cryptor quickly offered. "It was 5 hours into the activation, and you were still in the state of trance when the Inquisitor's party and the sisters showed up." New information. I looked at him silently, buying time to digest what he just said, but that seemed only to make him more desperate to defend his actions. After verifying their identity and waiting for another 2 hours, the whole system was acting up. So the Inquisitor and I decided to venture further into the chamber to see what we could do while the sisters offered to stay behind and look after you. I took all the Cataphron units with me in case of the presence of ancient dormant sentries. Without your authorization to pacify such entities, any such encounter without overwhelming firepower would be catastrophic to the function of this marvelous technology. The Dominus was talking so fast he was giving me the impression of a child explaining himself after being caught red-handed doing something forbidden by his parents. In hindsight, Thabris said, we were probably being monitored. The timing of their attack was impeccable. So the insurgents attempted to murder the Holy Daughter? Alicia asked, fuming with righteous fury. That remained to be seen. All we know is the Dominus party arrival on this planet had threatened the rebels' plan enough for them to reveal their assets, including the presence of renegade Astartes amongst their ranks. Thabris said before turning his attention back on me. Now, lady, He looked at me expectantly. Syrine. I handed him the only accurate information I knew. Lady Syrine, would you care to enlighten us? Who are you? How do you know this place, and why did you activate this massive psychic beacon? He was trying to be civilized about his questioning now, but seriously, that did not put a dent on his intimidation value one bit. So much for diversions. My mouth opened, but no answer came to mind. Desperate for a way out, I ran cogitatio acceleratio again and tried to use the small period of time dilation to dig into my mind like the trick I did before with the low Gothic tongue in search for an answer for my predicament. The world slowed again. I closed my eyes to cut off distraction, and my consciousness looked inward. Nodded. Why was Syrine here? Tell me. I probed inwards and felt a sense of resistance. Tell me. I need to know. A sense of unspoken understanding rose inside me. You are not ready. No. An inquisitor is breathing down on my neck. Tell me. At first, nothing happened, then slowly a hint of a vision flashed for a split second, and my mind registered something so terrifying it broke my trance. When I opened my eyes, my face was merely inches away from the floor. Apparently, the assassin's inhuman reflexes had rescued me from a major self-inflicted embarrassment by stopping my body mid-collapse. I turned my head to the assassin only to see her eyeing me with a cold stare. It was still embarrassing enough, and I could only thank her with a wry smile. Sister Alicia quickly aided me back on my feet and protested. Lady Syrine is not in the condition for this. Inquisitor Thorn, I would like to reaffirm my request to you to not further burden my benefactor. Cryptorer backed her up. The atmosphere tensed up again. While still somewhat dazed, I looked around and noticed for the first time the individuals gathered here could probably affect the fate of billions of people with their actions. An Inquisitor, with theoretically absolute authority on imperial matters, an Dominus, who proclaimed himself as the highest ranking of his cult on the planet, a Palatine Sister of Battle, whose rank was below a canoness of the Adeptus Sororitas order, and Syrine. Me. Whoever Syrine was, she was not your ordinary girl next door, seeing how Cryptorer treated her with a degree of veneration, and that was even before looking into that ridiculous prophesied true daughter of the Emperor's story Sister Alicia spoke of. Within a heartbeat, I somehow got a solid hold of the current situation. What's up with this superhuman level clarity of thinking? But my concern was on the rapidly developing situation, so I cut straight into the main current issues at hand. My memory is not good for now. But correct me if I got this wrong, we are now cut off from the wider Imperium and more renegade Marines are coming. Did this world request for reinforcements yet, and what was this uprising suppression you spoke of, Sister Alicia? Finally given the chance to talk, Alicia was only too happy to quickly brief me about the plight of their world. A local lord who was the brother of the current planetary governor had taken up arms against the ruling regime with the help of questionable factions, and a full-blown civil war was happening even as we speak. The minor order of Adeptus Sororitas stationed on the planet initially stayed neutral in the family dispute, but later through their support to the incumbent governor when they received numerous reports about unknown and sketchy forces that were operating under the usurper lord's faction. The Uprising faction then showed their true colors by massacring the Psykers of Adeptus Astra Telepathica chamber to a man, almost cutting off any off-world communication entirely. By then what looked like a power grab at the planetary governor's seat had become a separatist movement in all but name, and a full-scale war soon followed. Even with the aid of the Adeptus Sororitas, the governor's forces had a hard time dealing with the rebels, further proving the latter had help from unseen players. The fighting was so fierce that a sizable portion of the order had martyred themselves in it, and Alicia was made probationary Palatine despite being relatively young for the position. Now, according to the lore I knew, power grabbing is something the Imperium would usually turn a blind eye to as long as whoever won the seat of power cooperated fully with the Empire. But a separationist movement with the aid of renegade space marines? That would open up proper reasons to request urgent reinforcement from the wider Imperium, and usually, loyalist Astartes chapters would be racing over to curb-stomp the usurpers in such circumstances. That was when Thabris broke the bad news. The lone surviving Astropath was under his care in a secure location, but the Psyker had since failed to send out any messages due to unusual warp activities. Unacceptable, Cryptorer declared suddenly. The instability caused by this war threatens the wondrous work of the Omnicia. I looked at the Dominus and suddenly recalled how obsessive their kind was to treasuring technological wonders, and had a really bad feeling about this uprising consisting of renegade Marines, so I put my theory to the test. Crypto, if they win they might destroy all this. Can you help? Cryptorer turned his massive body to me and spoke. Affirmative. 12 hours ago, I had tapped into the main information network of this planet and have been conversing with the local adepts of my order, appraising the situation. He paused, then continued. From my analysis, the opposition appears to have Astartes-level background support in key logistics, electronic, and communications warfare. That was why they were having the upper hand. Sensing his confidence, I followed up. Will that be a problem for you? Inconceivable. He made a sound that was halfway between scoffing and air expulsion. For the others, it might be difficult. But electronic communications warfare happens to be one of my primary research topics, and we have the support of a whole starship's worth of advanced cogitators in orbit. My analysis shows that a key breakthrough development can be conceptualized within the next 72 hours if my resources are deployed to aid the governor. It was at this moment a skull probe, literally a drone built into a human skull, flew in from nowhere and dropped something into the Dominus' hand. He opened his metallic palm for everyone to see the item. It was a boxy, spidery thing no bigger than a matchbox. This device, he said with his metallic voice, is an Astartes-grade sentry probe utilized by some of the stealthier chapters, and how they knew when to attack just now. I have erred in underestimating our opponent and caused harm to you, omniscient princess. He bowed to me. Allow me to atone by securing victory for the governor and thus safeguarding the glorious work of the Omnisia. I nodded. With that secured, I turned to Thabris. Will you allow us to help, Inquisitor? Well, they had renegade Astartes on their side, so their heresy was all but confirmed. In the light of the Emperor's domain being threatened here, I would allow it for now, and we'll be sorting out your case later. Palatine Alicia, you should take the Archdominus to the governor and Canoness Dinah immediately and update them on the situation. What about Lady SYRINE? Alicia asked. Without a valid reason, she should never be anywhere near the front line. Only Omnisia knows what will happen to this psychic beacon should something happen to her. Crypterer said. Thanks. I said internally to Crypterer as the front line was the last place I wanted to go. That said, I surveyed the carnage left behind by the gunfight and didn't feel like sticking around either. Maybe I can try helping with the call for reinforcements that the Astropath was having problems sending out? I inquired simply for the heck of it. To my surprise, Thabris. Chapter 6, Getting Acquainted. So we were to split up after that. Crypterer would join Sister Alicia to make haste to the front line, and there they would link up with the other battle sisters and the governor's forces to hopefully put a stop to the uprising. Whereas I would follow Thabris' party to the location where the last Astropath on the planet was kept secure. Please take care of yourself. I will leave some units to secure this site and will be sending your belongings over once I have received the arrangement from the Inquisitor. Crypterer told me in binary canonical. Not knowing what to say and deathly afraid of blowing my own cover, I merely nodded. Seemingly satisfied with my response, the Archdominus then turned to Thabris. Inquisitor Thorn, I will now leave Lady SYRINE's well-being in your capable hands. Please see to it that no harm would come to her while she is in your care. Fail to do so, and I guarantee you will receive more than just a formal protest from me and my order. Now he just sounds like a nagging old dad. Wait, did he just threaten an Inquisitor? I will do that, and meanwhile await your good news within the next 72 hours, Archdominus. Thabris simply replied. With that, we parted, leaving a whole chamber of burned bodies and wounded behind. I followed Thabris' group down the route where the gunmen came from and walked through a seemingly endless amount of corridors and strange indoor interiors. We were a party of 6. The Inquisitor Thabris himself was leading at the front. Right behind him was Interrogator Amael, followed by Acolyte Herlindia, then me and Ranter, and finally the fear-inducing assassin Neandra guarding our back. Ranter Crane was a rough-looking man who looked to be in his late 30s. He was what you would expect of stereotypical inquisitorial henchman, with a massive amount of war gear hung around his carapace armor while carrying a large hotshot volley gun as if it was the easiest thing to do in this world. Amael Frieden, the interrogator, was quiet and reserved. He seemed to be in his late 20s, had dark blonde hair, and could be considered quite handsome. If this was a story about the rise of a promising Imperial agent, he would fit right in as the protagonist. Herlindia Winson, the female acolyte, was a nice-looking brunette with shoulder-length hair who also seemed to be in her late 20s. She too was reserved in her mannerism, but seemed friendly enough. I had to emphasize the part of seemed to be for their respective ages. From my understanding of the lore of this universe, being agents of the Inquisition meant that these individuals would have access to life-prolonging rejuvenate treatments. Coupled that with faster-than-light warp travel between star systems, making accurate age guessing a much messier process than I was accustomed to. Then there was Neandra, who was behind my back, no doubt to keep an eye on me. I knew she was there, but no footsteps could be heard from behind. Every time I remembered she was behind me, the memory of her dragging the limbless Marine with a massive amount of blood dripping everywhere would resurface. She was just horrifying. Speaking of the amputated Marine, Thabris had decided he was to be temporarily left to the sisters to be imprisoned inside their monastery nearby. Ranter was the most talkative individual among the retinue members after we got acquainted, thanking me openly once he had the chance. "Hey, back then it was you who warned us of that flamer, right? Amael and I would have been toast if it wasn't for your heads up. That was much appreciated, and I owe you one for it." The large man then laughed heartily and continued, "Usually, it is my job to hurt people and get thanks for it, but I had my hands full just trying not to get shot back there." Both Amael and Herlindia remained distantly neutral after their brief self-introduction. As far as I could tell, Thabris neither encouraged nor forbade his retinue from interacting with me. The Inquisitor himself was always leading in the front and never once looked back since we left that chamber, ever marching purposefully forward. We walked and walked, finally exiting from a seemingly impossibly huge complex to the outdoors. The sky was a weird dirty purple instead of the classic blue. Just nearby was a landing pad with a huge black and dark red colored gunship of unknown pattern resting on top of it. My old hobbyist self kicked in as I gawked at the unfamiliar black and dark red armored bulk and pointed at it. "What pattern is that gunship? That looks too long for a Storm Raven, but too tall for a Fire Raptor." "Wow, someone knows her gunship patterns," remarked Ranter with a chuckle while the rest of the group stayed quiet. The gunship was much larger at close-up inspection than I imagined and definitely looked like a hybrid variant between a Storm Raven and a Fire Raptor. A huge stylized eye was prominently displayed on the side of the gunship, and I could just envision the folks excelling at kid-ash and going to town to create this beautiful machine. The pilot must have known we were coming as the rear hatch opened up without prompting and we entered the gunship through it. Cool, temperature-controlled air greeted us, and some of the retinue members sighed with relief. The interior of the gunship was more spacious than I imagined, probably due to the initial schematics, which was meant for armored space marines that could reach 8 feet in height. They even had a washing closet installed inside the gunship. It was then I remembered the Storm Raven gunship of the Space Marines could serve as an orbital dropship, which probably meant this thing could break orbit and link up with any starships orbiting the planet, thus the presence of such a facility for long transits. After settling down on my assigned seat, I was hit by a massive wave of mental fatigue, so I dutifully strapped on my safety harness even as I longed to doze off immediately. Just as I finished fastening the centerpiece of the harness that straps to my chest, I felt the sensation of solid material pressing against my skin. Puzzled, I dug beneath my collar and pulled out a necklace with an Aquila pendant attached to an exquisite piece of metallic string chain of unknown material. The Aquila pendant itself was shaped into an old-school symbol of Imperium, a stylized double-headed eagle with circular curve wings. Both the string chain and pendant had a glorious golden finishing that was just screaming, "I am exorbitantly expensive," from its appearance. Curious, but on the verge of dozing off, before I realized it, Analytica was run on the pendant. I am just so tired. I wanted to laugh out loud at myself for running the ability on an object. Then a line of words appeared. "Imperial Authority Rosette. Gene-locked to SYRINE." My sight froze on the words. Didn't Cryptora mention something about needing my authority? So this is no mere jewelry? It looks gorgeous. I turned in my hand, marveling at how it reflected all the lights from the interior of the gunship. While I was drowning in thoughts, the gunship started moving. Soon the motion with the monotonous ambient sound inside the gunship combined with mental fatigue hit me like a rock, and I felt myself drifting off while holding onto the pendant. Accessing. 1. Responding machine spirit within the vicinity. Connect? Yes/no ++. Yes. Connecting, connection established. Accessing machine spirit via Ethernet link. Authority confirmed and accepted. We are ready to serve. Welcome on board Inquisitorial Gunship, Flame Raven, #machine ID. Glory to Omnicia and him on Earth. We await your command. Authority. Command? Show me. List show. 1. Ship status. 2. Weapon status. 3. Auspex reading for ship log. 5. Weapons. Show me your weapons. List weapons. 1. Front-mounted twin multi-melta, system functional. 2. Left sponson twin heavy bolter, system functional. 3. Right sponson twin heavy bolter, system functional. 4. Left underwing twin loss cannon, system functional. 5. Right underwing twin loss cannon, system functional. 6. Chaff flare launcher, system functional. In my dreamy state, I selected the twin multi-melta listing, Suddenly a video feed popped up in my vision, and it was showing the front view of the gunship where the weapon was aiming. The moment I focused on the video feed, another mental prompt popped up. Manual override. Huh, why not? Yes. Additional interfaces appeared on the video feed, showing the estimated projectile path, and the guns were obeying my command, pointing in the direction I wanted. Huh, this definitely feels like a certain Battlefield game I played. Since all I could see were clouds on a dirty purple sky, I soon got bored and exited the weapon video feed. Next, I tried the aspects section. Immediately, a three-dimensional image of the gunship's surroundings materialized inside my mind. Wow, so high-tech. Upon closer inspection, I could zoom in and out, pan the aspects reading around inside my head. When the view was zoomed out to the furthest setting, I could even see the details of terrain passing beneath us in real time. This is nice, but I am so tired. Priority alert. Aspects error. Priority alert. Weapons locked on warning. 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 Error. Something was not right. I broke from my trance-like light sleep and found myself still strapped to the chair with the pendant in my hand on a flying gunship. The air was still nice and cold, but a sense of unspeakable dread started to well up. While securing the pendant back inside my robe, I looked around and noticed only Neandra was still up and alert, sitting in a corner. Thabris was nowhere to be seen, but if I recall correctly, he went forward to the cockpit the moment we boarded, whereas the trio of henchmen were fast asleep just across my seat. After a moment of hesitation, I signaled for Neandra to come over. This was no time for subtlety. The assassin was slightly puzzled at first, but quickly came to my side. Yes, she asked with a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. Is the name of this ship Flame Raven? She slowly nodded. Somehow her pretty cold face got colder. Being a quick one, she might have deduced something was up since no one had told me the name of the gunship until now. But the shock I received was no less than hers. That she all but confirmed the name of Flame Raven meant the weird communion I had just now was not some fluke. A connection did happen between me and the ship. If this is a lucid dream, it just keeps getting better and better. Putting up a tone as serious as I could, I delivered my warning. In this case, I am afraid we might be under attack. There may be at least 4 weapon systems locking onto the ship, and the ship's aspects is probably being jammed. How do you know that? Right, pal? Thinking quickly, I told her the story in a way people in this world could understand. The machine spirit told me it called itself Flame Raven. To put a long story short, the basic understanding of technology had regressed so much in the Grimdark universe, the common explanation of machines having spirits, thus, machine spirit, was widely accepted for how advanced machinery works around here. I was just going with the flow to put my point across. Neandra looked straight at me for a moment before putting her hand on her ear to put a vox through, probably to Thabris. Sir? Our guest warns of imminent attacks on the Flame Raven. Apparently, the machine spirit told her so. She then listened for a little while before suddenly started unfastening my harness with haste. Neandra. Startled by her action, I inquired hastily. She gave me this long look before answering. We are going to the cockpit. The attack you mentioned is coming. Chapter 7 Unfriendly Sky. Neandra was leading the way towards the cockpit when the interior of the gunship dimmed down and its interior lighting changed to a tactical setting, switching light energy sources from the main circuit to independent units, and a low siren began to ring out as the air tensed up. Following Neandra, I crossed a door hatch. Since this was a void-capable ship meant for space marines, the cockpit compartment was spacious enough for 4 people. There were 2 pilot seats at the front of the cockpit. Inquisitor Thabris occupied one of it without his signature capitaine hat. Beside him was a lady in a smart, blue Imperial Navy uniform with a pair of cool shades. A constant chime of warnings could be heard coming from the instruments, and the panel lights were reflecting off nicely on the lady pilot's shade. We might be in trouble. Thabris cut to the chase and looked at me. Neandra mentioned the machine spirit was telling you something. Can you elaborate? I quickly tried to recall the message log I saw. Amazingly, it came back to me with absolute clarity. About 60 seconds ago, we were hit by severe system jamming followed by 4 suspected readings of unknown weapon systems locking onto us. I quickly summarized. Well, that certainly explained why our aspects had gone haywire. The pilot lady pointed to a radar-looking screen. On it was a jumbled-up-looking mess of readings. I got a really bad feeling about this. My feeling of unease rose exponentially as I threw out my next question. Are we flying over hostile territory? No, we were going through the green zone held by the forces of the governor. We deliberately chose the safest flight path to our destination. Thabris replied. Somehow, his answer only added to my feeling of foreboding. We needed answers and fast. Thankfully, I got this cheat ability right here and Cogitatio Acceleratio activated. The world slowed down again around me. First, I took a closer look at the panel of instruments and immediately gave up. Too much to learn and not enough time. I then ran Analytica on the lady pilot and nothing came back suspicious. Looks like my only weapon here was thinking. Something about this scenario felt amiss. Flying through a friendly area and getting the Auspex system jammed before being attacked? Why would the enemy go through that trouble unless? Are there any notable supposedly friendly anti-air assets situated around here that could take down Flame Raven? I immediately asked. There was a slight pause before Thabris realized the purpose of my question. The Flame Raven was a huge gunship of Astartes' usage, origin, and design. Nothing short of some serious firepower could threaten it from the sky. That meant the enemy knew the only way to take us down was that we did not know what was coming. Tasia? He turned to the pilot, urgency in his voice. Already on it, sir. The pilot lady accessed a touchscreen data panel and quickly found the information she was looking for. Records showed 4 operational Manticore anti-air platforms nearby, about 60 kilometers away. Manticore? Those things with the dreaded Storm Eagle rockets? Just the mention of the term Manticore conjured up memories of mass devastation during my tabletop gaming days. These weapon platforms carry the notorious Storm Eagle rockets that can absolutely wreck their intended targets from an extreme distance, and the anti-air version of it existed. That meant, I said before my mind was suddenly flooded with all the relevant information about the weapon in question. Manticore anti-air platforms were usually armed with the Sky Eagle rocket variants, which were heat-seeking warheads that targeted enemy aircraft's power signatures and engine exhaust. The standard rocket is divided into 5 sections: a fuse, the control and guidance equipment, the electrical unit, an explosive warhead, and a propellant container for the 2-stage solid fuel rocket with a top speed of 1,080 km per hour. By calculating the speed of the rockets and distance of roughly 60 kilometers, assuming the weapons were deployed at the time of jamming, the estimated time for rocket impact on Flame Raven is about 30 seconds. Since each platform can have up to 4 rockets, up to 16 rockets could be heading our way right now. I heard a calm and soothing female voice conveying the information before realizing it was my own. I looked up and saw Thabris staring straight at me. As our eyes met, a split second later his face somehow turned grimmer than usual as the implications of my words hit him. Throne's blood, he whispered. Neandra sprang into action, pushing me into a back seat on the wall of the cockpit and securing my harness with inhuman speed before doing the same for herself. Be advised, we are going on a full evasive maneuver, Tasia announced on the intercom. The onboard alarm went into full blare as the Flame Raven picked up speed. I was pushed back onto my seat by the sudden increase of G-force. What is with this endless amount of action film-like events? This is still the same lucid dream session, right? I couldn't help but think to myself, wondering if this must be some overcompensation for my decades of mundane life. But the warning blares in the cockpit and G-force felt real enough. I felt the gunship climbing as it continued to pick up speed. Inbound rockets confirmed on Auspex. Tasia's voice came through on the intercom. Apparently, the rockets were so close now even the jammed Auspex could pick them up. Hold on, Tasia said before commanding the Flame Raven to go from a climb to a steep banking dive. For a second there I felt gravity leaving me, then suddenly the G-force came back with a vengeance, pinning me to the back of my seat. Then a series of updates popped into my head. Less than 10 chaff flare discharged. Chaff and flare are countermeasures used by military aircraft to help evade missile attacks. But why was I receiving these messages? Am I still connected to the gunship's machine spirit? Pinned and unable to do anything, I tried calling it. Flame Raven? Received and ready to serve. Authority. It replied. Seemed like I don't need to be in a trance state to communicate with it. Show me real-time Auspex readings. Complying. A 3-dimensional image of the gunship surroundings materialized inside of my mind, and I could see the gunship was being chased by multiple flickering icons of incoming projectiles while dropping countermeasures. A second later, I understood that while Tasia was doing a great job getting the rockets off our tail, there might be too many of them for us to have a clean getaway. A huge explosion sounded from somewhere, coinciding with my Auspex readout of a rocket detonating on one of the chaff. The whole gunship shook, and amidst the chaos, I could even hear Herlindia's cries of horror from way behind in the fuselage. A feeling of unsuppressed terror started to assail me. Can you die in your dreams? They say if you die in your dream, you might die in real life too, right? Wait, how could they know that if they died in their dreams and never woke up to tell anyone? The flame raven shook violently as more explosions were happening nearby, waking me from my silly stupor, and this time I could even hear Amael and Ranner joining her Lindia with their outcry of cursings. I could have sworn I was screaming too, but instead, a familiar message appeared in my vision. Regulus, action override. Wait, what? This message again? Whatever, I don't want to die. I put my attention back to the Auspex readings again. To my utter horror, I soon came to the dreaded realization that if the events continued to unfold as the Auspex was showing, we would be cornered by the massive rockets in the next 8 seconds. No, 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 no. I immediately activated my thought acceleration and studied the readings, staring at the impending death sentence. We were already doing a steep banking dive at maximum speed with full chaff flare discharge, and we're out of cards to play. Hold on. This gunship has 2 fully rotatable twin heavy bolter sponsons, right? I closed my eyes and tried to communicate with the machine spirit of the gunship again while in the state of thought acceleration. Flame Raven, calculate intercepting firing solution for incoming rockets with left and right twin heavy bolter sponsons. Was that too complicated? Unable to comply, Auspex error. That darn jamming again. Manual override. Give me the control for both twin heavy bolter sponsons. Complying. 2 video feeds popped up inside my vision, directly showing me where the twin heavy bolters were aiming. Everything happened in a painfully slow manner while my thought acceleration was active except for those darned incoming rocket icons. They were fast approaching. I immediately rotated the guns to point at the rough direction for intercepting fire while consulting the flickering Auspex readings. These inaccurate readings won't work. I wanted to cry as despair was setting in, then it hit me. I had my own Auspex, just that it might not have enough range. Still worth a try rather than being dead, though. I concentrated inwards on that feeling again, and a moment later, activated Auspex as hard as I could. A massive sensor net burst forth from me towards the swarm of approaching rockets and registered their true locations to me in real time. I got you now, you bastards. A brief moment after I consulted my Auspex reading, a transcendent level of calculation took place inside my head in slow motion as the ideal path of intercepting fire appeared in my mind. Putting my faith in what was revealed to me, I adjusted both the left and right sponsons to the exact position and mentally triggered the firing mechanism. For streams of mass reactive rounds burst forth from Flame Raven, hitting some of the incoming rockets at the last second, and the resulting chain explosions pushed the gunship just enough to escape the massive impact zone from the rocket's crossfire. Even protected by the solid hull of the gunship, I felt the huge shockwave. The massive gunship groaned, spun and tumbled uncontrollably for a while in the air before the advanced avionics stabilized itself. The pandemonium ended abruptly, and we continued on our journey as if nothing ever happened. I gasped and looked around, confirming we were all still alive as evident from the screaming still coming from the passenger section. Flame Raven, thank you. I sent. Unknown command, unable to comply. It sent back. I wanted to laugh out loud, only to be stopped by a message appearing in my vision. Regulus, action override. Utterly flustered, I resigned myself to the fate of sitting quietly on my chair. We continued our flight in silence until Tasya spoke up. It seems like Flame Raven took out a few rockets with the heavy bolters at the very last second. But this is weird. I had been trying to engage the ballistic interception protocol, but it would not boot up, probably due to the heavy jamming, and here the system records indicate those guns were on manual control at the moment it fired. I might as well come clean again before incurring any unwanted misunderstandings in the future, so I raised my hand like a dutiful citizen and declared. It was me. Flame Raven didn't want to die either, so we cooperated to get out of that tight spot. Everyone in the cockpit turned and looked at me. Just who are you again, Lady SYRINE? Fabris finally asked. Seemed like the Inquisitor was showing me some respect. But, Lady. It was so cringy being called that my skin started to crawl. My male soul cried out in protest. I don't remember, but please, just call me SYRINE. Fabris did not reply and his face was unreadable. I insist on it, I said, surprising even myself. The rest of the short trip was uneventful other than the trio at the back of the gunship finally crammed into the cockpit asking what just happened. By then I had closed my eyes and tried to get some rest, but found it impossible to sleep again. It continued to be so right up until we reached our destination to meet the Astropath. Chapter 8, The Astropath. Approaching landing pad. Tasia's voice, which was dripping with the professionalism of a military pilot, broke the serenity inside the gunship's cockpit. "Where are we?" I asked absent-mindedly. "Why not try asking your machine spirit friend?" Neandra replied flatly from beside me. That caught me by surprise on two fronts. First, this was the first time the assassin had actively talked to me. Second, is this supposed to be a test or friendly banter? I shot her a side glance before trying my luck checking the active flight log with the machine spirit. There mixed within all the updates was the identification, friend or foe exchanges with air traffic control. After a brief moment, it concluded we were friendly and held off multiple anti-air turrets from shooting us just minutes ago. I checked the details on the IFF exchanges and read the digital signature of the air traffic control. Fortress Endurance Sigma? I read it out loud. "By the throne, you really can speak to the machine spirit," gasped Tasia while the rest of the crew looked at me like witnessing a ghost. Not a word of this to the outside. Thabris dropped his warning, thus everyone refrained from further commenting, and we finally got to see the last Astropath on the planet. What surprised me more about the Astropath was not the Astropath himself. I've read about them as a hobbyist and had this mental image of what a stereotypical Astropath looks like. Blind, pale skin, balding hair, wielding a staff with a stylized eye on it, wearing a stylish eye shade, and probably has a few random wires sticking out of their head. Aratus Ray in the Astropath was all that, but with some crucial missing details from the lore I read. He also enjoyed a level of security, healthcare, and comfortable living standards rivaling that of the planetary governor. The layers of security checkpoints I went through reminded me of what was depicted in some of the superhero movies on how they kept really dangerous supervillains on lockdown. We passed through multiple blast doors and checkpoints manned by stormtroopers with hotshot lasguns ready, and even heavier guns like heavy bolters and plasma cannons mounted on gun servitors were ever present on all strategic locations in the building. It was clear they were not taking any chances on the security. As usual, Thabris' inquisitorial rosette opened all doors, and we made a steady pace towards the innermost sanctum. In a way, it made sense. To put it bluntly, even the planetary governor can be easily replaced in leadership capacity if the unthinkable happens, but there was no immediate replacement for an Astropath should Aratus be slain by the enemy. With the scheduled starship arrival on indefinite delay, he was literally the last link between the planet and the wider Imperium, the VVIP of the planet. It was no exaggeration to say his very well-being affected the fate of the billions of souls residing here, hence the around-the-clock security measures and extreme precautions taken on his health management. Aratus, for his part, had an air of awkwardness about him, like he did not know whether to stand or sit in our presence. Then again, it was in no way mundane for an Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor in full battle gear, armored fedora hat with a greatcoat, inferno pistol on the belt, and more to come visit you in your quarters. It was, however, plain for me to see that Aratus and Thabris were acquainted. As expected of an Inquisitor worthy of his salt, Thabris had apparently double-checked the integrity of the sole surviving Astropath on the planet. "Aratus, this is SYRINE." As always, Thabris cut straight to the point, and I was glad he did remember to cut off the lady title when addressing me. "Work with her to see if you can establish contact with any nearby Imperial world and send out a message requesting reinforcements citing renegade Astartes." Then Thabris turned to me. "Please see to it no harm comes to him in the process. His talent is sorely needed in this challenging time." Finally, he gathered his retinue. "Neandra, you stay here with them. The rest of you with me." Neandra turned her head, but before she could say a word, Thabris made his point. "Both of them are, as of now, of absolute strategic value for this world. Surely you are as indispensable?" I asked. "No, I am not," he answered matter-of-factly. "If I am taken out of the equation, either Amael or Neandra will take over command and proceed with a more defensive approach on what to do next." I looked at him, finding it interesting that an individual can nonchalantly mention the possibility of self-demise, but he totally ignored my gaze. "Inquisitor, you are leaving?" Aratus asked. "Yes, Mr. Rain. Unfortunately, heretics tend not to purge themselves. May the Emperor guide you on your work," Thabris replied. With that said, he left the room. His retinue fell in behind him to their undoubtedly bloody inquisitorial business, their boots echoing down the hallway foreshadowing the violence to come. Neandra saw them off and then melted into the shadows. That left me and Aratus. I ran Analytica on the Astropath. His readings came back as expected. Name, Aratus Rain, human, Psyker, Astropath. "Hello," I said, greeting the Psyker. That was such an unusual way of greeting, You aren't from around here, are you? Oops, guess I did it by doing greetings in English instead of Low Gothic. Hello in English just felt so natural after decades of usage, it completely slipped through my lips. You are a sharp one, Astropath. I jested in my awkward attempt to cover my slip-up. Please, Lady SYRINE, just call me by my name. He actually looked kind of embarrassed. But he called me that, and it hit me hard. If there was one thing I might never get used to, it would be being called a lady. Fine. I said, in return, please drop the lady when addressing me in private. Let us treat each other as peers. He paused slightly before asking, so how do we go about this? Pardon me, but I am at a loss on what is going on around here. I thought for a moment and decided to just get straight into it. Please brief me on how you do your work, and we will see what we can do from there. Everything considered, we went off with a good start. HIATUS began his lengthy crash course with me on the art of astrotelepathy while I paid full attention to him with ceaseless usage of cogitatio acceleratio between his lectures. With this incredible body that housed my amazingly sharp mind, it felt like cheating. The moment he finished making a statement and describing a concept, I would speed up my thought process with cogitatio acceleratio. Conjured mental notes and diagram to fully grasp whatever he said, pausing the process to ask important questions, rinsing and repeating until satisfied. After about 2 hours or so, I was beginning to have a good understanding of the whole process, though it must be mentioned with thought acceleration constantly in effect. From my point of view, it felt like I had been working on it for a full day. As for HIATUS, he seemed to be getting more animated as the lecture went on. My crucial questions only added to his enthusiastic energy as the session dragged on. He must have found lecturing to be a very refreshing experience, as evidently there was little to no chance to discuss his work if ever in his line of service. Even with all that enthusiasm pushing him, I could see HIATUS was reaching his limits, so after telling him to take a break and politely declining his invitation for a quick dinner, I continued the work alone. For unknown reasons, hunger and thirst never seemed to cross my mind. I wondered about it for a moment before deciding to leave it at that. There were just too many unknowns in this new existence. With the freshly learned techniques, I went into a meditative state, rerunning the lessons with thought acceleration in the back of my head for the final wrap-up. The process continued until a feeling of sufficient understanding hit my mind, and I knew it was time for a small trial run of what I have learned. This feels so trippy. I felt my senses expand into the next realm. The world went weird for a brief moment as I attempted to send out a psychic message. Plus hello. Plus. HIATUS, who was having his belated dinner nearby, jolted and apparently tipped over his drink on the dining table. I could hear the mess he was creating across the hallway. Plus was that you? Lady SYRINE. Plus he sent back. Plus Astropath. What did we just agree on? Plus I returned. More sounds could be heard from across the hallway, the type of sound eating utensils made when dropped to the marble floor. A slight pause later. Plus, could you please turn it down a little? The intensity you were sending the message hurt my head. Plus. I gasped at the reply, after focusing on adjusting thought intensity as best I could by making it as light as possible, and sent another message. Plus, sorry. How is it now? Plus. Plus, much better. Thank you. Plus. Suddenly I felt his presence had a dramatic change. The best way to describe it was a great sense of fear started to flood from his direction across the hallway. Having just survived multiple attacks earlier in the day, my sense of alarm was cranked up to the maximum level in an instance. Standing up, my cogitatio acceleratio kicked in as I activated Auspex for an instant mind sweep around the area. In an almost painful slowness within my accelerated mind, my surroundings were revealed to me as information dripped in pace with my sensor net as it expanded outwards. There were 3 maids, 2 medics, 2 servitors, 18 armed guards with hotshot las guns, and 12 gun servitors with heavy bolters within 100 meters outside his living quarters. Also in the detection net were dozens of active security cameras, none inside HIATUS' living space. Neandra was in another nearby room checking on security details. HIATUS had a Lost pistol on him, a very typical setup. Glaringly missing was any kind of threat that would have spooked HIATUS. Plus HIATUS? Plus I asked, being very careful with my intensity this time. Another slight pause later he answered. Plus wah. Plus he was practically trembling on his psychic message. Plus what are you? Plus HIATUS. What are you even talking about? Plus concerned and confused, I asked while walking towards the Astropath. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. HIATUS had his pistol drawn and the gun was pointing in my direction. I could see my own reflection on the stylish eye shade that covered his blind eyes. The blatant hostility that was emanating from him was more of a mixture of fear than intent to kill. He was simply terrified. "HIATUS, what is wrong? Stop right there. Don't get any closer." He aimed his pistol in a threatening manner. The intensity of his emotion made me wince. "How did you do that when you were not even a psyker? Are you even human?" he demanded. His voice was starting to break due to the amount of duress he was experiencing. Caught by this unexpected turn of events, I was totally dumbstruck by his revelation. Chapter 9, Psykana Activa. From the lore material I knew, psychers in this universe can easily distinguish their kin apart from the mundane masses with their psychic senses. HIATUS had made it plain with his actions that I did not register as a psyker to his senses. Unfortunately, that could not explain my abilities nor my success in communicating with him via psychic means. It had spooked him so much he was prepared to shoot me with his lost pistol. Being a civilian all my life, I was at a loss of what to do in this tense situation. Just as things were about to turn from bad to worse, Neandra appeared out of nowhere and took control of the situation. The Imperial assassin disarmed HIATUS in the blink of an eye and sat him down back on his dining chair. Her frigid face had the slightest hint of exasperation as she was eyeing me the whole time while performing the incredible feat with a flawless motion. I could read her mind without even trying. In modern layman terms, it would be the equivalent of asking, "What the hell are you doing, you noob?" "Master Rain." Neandra calmly addressed the distraught Astropath. "Do not be alarmed. I can assure you SYRINE is not an enemy of the throne." After hearing those words, HIATUS took his senses off me and turned to Neandra to validate how much he can trust her on that statement. It was at this moment someone opened the main door. A squad of stormtroopers stepped in, a grizzled man leading at the front as the sound of their military boots echoed in the living quarter. The squad's outfit and wardrobe was a match from the old Kazarkan box when one used to be able to get a squad of 10 metal miniatures in the package, carapace armor draped over body glove, and hotshot las guns at the ready. The sergeant was a man who had the look of special forces written all over him. His squarish jaw and the way he walked simply screamed elite militarism. Repeating one of the biggest cliches of the Grimdark universe, the man was the only one in the squad who was not wearing a helmet. "Is everything all right?" the sergeant asked, his tone of voice firm and respectful but unwavering. He was the only one who was not holding a weapon, though his right hand hovered just above the hotshot las pistol holstered on his belt. The rest of the stormtroopers fanned out behind him in well-trained tactical spacing. "Master Rain, please explain the misunderstanding," Neandra said while stepping back from the Astropath in her attempt to de-escalate the situation. Though from my understanding of her capabilities, a distance of a few meters might as well be face-to-face contact for the Imperial assassin. HIATUS started talking with the sergeant, but my mind was fast drifting with the latest revelation. How was it possible I didn't register as a psyker from the Astropath's point of view? All the abilities I used seemed psychic in nature. Dumbfounded, I raised my left palm and looked into it, and found I couldn't help myself from marveling at the flawless porcelain skin. Just as I was thinking of what I won't do to get a girlfriend with such fine skin in my previous life, an idea crept into my head. Wait, can I analyze myself? The sudden realization of such a potential struck me like lightning. With a staggering mind, I used Analytica on myself. The world seemed to freeze for a while before words started forming in my vision. Name, SYRINE, Primarch Minori's, Psyker Passive, Abnormal Existence. Looking at the words and their implication, I felt like my body wanted to tremble, except it could not. As if rejecting an order from a lower authority, this body refused to convulse. The sensation of such incongruity triggered my instinct to vomit, but again, the action did not happen. Primarch Minori's. My mind went wild on that revelation. The Primarchs were genetically engineered transhuman sons of the Emperor of Mankind. They are a huge part of the lore of the Grimdark universe. 20 were known to be created. These beings were intended to be the immortal and superhuman generals who commanded the Space Marine legions for Emperor's Great Crusade to reunite the scattered human race beneath his leadership. A memory surfaced into my mind as I struggled to organize my thoughts. It was from that shocking moment when Sister Alicia suddenly knelt in front of me. "You must be the prophesied true daughter of the Emperor that he on Holy Terra has sent to lead us," the Palatine had said. So SYRINE was really a true bona fide daughter of the freaking Emperor level of existence? But there was never any mention of any Primarch Minori's in the lore I knew, let alone a female Primarch who was normal human size and stature. Since most Primarchs were basically super transhuman beings towering over the normal transhuman Space Marines averaging 7 feet in height, that would render her looking like a doll in front of her brothers. Recalling all the information I had on the subject matter, the only loyalist Primarch that was still alive, active and kicking at the end of the 41st millennium in the Grimdark universe was none other than Robot Guilliman of the Ultramarines. Affectionately known in my gaming circle with funny nicknames such as Girly Man or Ultra Papa Smurf, the latter being a reference of his Legion heraldry color being an unfortunate match with a bunch of tiny blue creatures from a happier universe. Guilliman himself had actually been kept in a stasis field for 10,000 years after being fatally wounded in a battle and was recently resurrected to continue the plot, but that was a long story too convoluted to be told here. That said, having faced Guilliman himself multiple times on the tabletop game myself, one thing was very obvious to me. Written clearly on the Primarch's datasheet was monster. That would indirectly mean whatever this Primarch Minori status entailed, I might not even come close to being a human despite this ideal female appearance on the outside. If this world was indeed the same Grimdark universe that I knew well, it would be an understatement to say I was in a whole world of dire troubles. SYRINE's status as a Primarch Minori should be an imperial state secret of the highest order, and any wrong move going forward might seal my own worse-than-death scenario that comes in thousands of different flavors available here. The world seemed to spin as I pondered on my predicament, and my vision rested upon the second line of my inquiry result, Psych or Passive. As if answering my unspoken question, a new line of words popped up into my vision. Activate Psykana Activa? Yes/no. With my limited knowledge of Latin, this seemed to roughly translate to active Psyker mode. What would happen if I went active? What about the perils of the warp? A part of me wanted to recoil just by thinking what could go wrong, but I was really curious, and since all my abilities' activation thus far seemed to serve me well, I guess there was only one way to find out. It was then I noticed the stormtroopers finally left. It seemed like HIATUS got that matter sorted. No time better than now. This is still a dream, right? I held my breath and selected yes from the prompt. At first, nothing happened. Then, the surroundings went weird, like some hidden locks were switched off, and an unworldly quality took over. I felt my senses grow and my field of view, for the lack of proper words, extended. It felt paradoxical, like being very trippy while maintaining your mental clarity at the same time. The sense of connection to the world kept expanding, and a feeling of many unseen windows were opened beyond the senses. My mind struggled with these new sensations, and then I realized there was this strong resonance nearby, so very close. Like a submarine that just turned on its active sonar and received a huge ping reading. I turned to the source of resonance and saw it was HIATUS. He was facing me with his jaw dropped. The Astropath's existence took on an extra-dimensional quality from my current point of view, rendering him more real than the surroundings, and I could easily pinpoint his exact position even with my eyes closed. So this is how Psykers could tell each other apart. There is no hiding from this. Indescribable energy swirled around and inside me. It was gaining strength and seemed to obey my will, at least for now. Mindful of all the horror stories about the warp, I tried my best to keep it under tight control. When I finally got it stabilized, HIATUS was still in his stupor, gaping at me. "That light," he murmured. "Light?" I asked. No reply. Was he looking at me or behind me? While I understood HIATUS was technically blind, I now knew his psychic sense more than made up for his sight, so I turned around and saw what he meant. Even when visually blocked by many layers of walls, a huge psychic beam could be seen shining from beyond the horizon, shooting into the heavens, its psychic brightness transcending the material plane when one was psychically attuned. The huge silvery golden beam was so beautiful and for some unknown reasons felt familiar. Wait, is that the massive activated psychic beacon they were all talking about? Instinctively, I raised my hand, trying to touch and feel it, but that was silly since it was so far away. Just as I was about to laugh at my own silliness, I felt an odd sensation of a connection established with the psychic light. Huh? Not knowing what just happened and with my hand still raised, I slowly turned my palm. Responding to my action, the massive pillar of psychic light actually changed its intensity. Oi, this is bad, right? What have I done? Panicking, I adjusted the pillar of light back to its original intensity as best I could and tried to sever the weird connection. Luckily, it seemed like mental intent was all it took to get things to work with the psychic stuff. I felt the connection disappeared. I hope no one saw that. Wait, HIATUS is here. Crap. Not knowing what to do, I turned to face the Astropath, only to see him on his knees calling to the Emperor and apologizing to me in a semi-coherent flurry of speech. Dumbfounded again, I stood still as HIATUS pressed his forehead down, touching the floor, with tears flowing down cheeks as he begged for forgiveness in his whimpering voice. Eagerly wanting to avoid the stormtroopers barging in again, I turned to Neandra for help. The assassin was there looking at me with a complex expression, but she got the hint. She moved in and put her hand on his back. Master Rain, no one is going to hurt you as long as I am here. As I said, SYRINE is not an enemy, nor will she do anything to you. Her cold, authoritative voice and powerful presence did the trick, and HIATUS calmed down a lot after that. Maybe my psychic active mode has something to do with this hysteria? Thinking about that, I tried deactivating Psykana Activa. The power responded to my will and shut itself off. The world went back to normal, which was a huge relief. Looking at the sheer absurdity surrounding me, suddenly I had an epiphany. That was it. Though very rare, this must be one of the extended lucid dream sessions I had read before on the internet. Thinking back, ever since I started role-playing as SYRINE, I never had any food nor drinks and had never gone to the toilet. Dream theory confirmed. Now that this was understood, I just had to let this session run its course and get back to my life. Finally feeling relieved, I knelt to face the weeping Astropath at eye level. While he did look kind of pathetic, thinking back on my own experience so far, if it was not for Regulus, I might have embarrassed myself with openly screaming and weeping a few times just today alone. So, I did my best to join Neandra in comforting him. A good thing my current voice was so calm and soothing. HIATUS, please. To tell you the truth, I recently just lost most of my memories and need your help. This planet and its people need your help too. Let's work together. He stopped weeping but remained silent. Does he still need an extra push for encouragement? He was calling to the Emperor, right? Sigh, people of this world. I lamented internally and pushed forth with my final sales pitch. Come on, Astropath, if not for this world, for the Emperor. Yes. He finally responded by turning to me. Suddenly the frail Astropath seemed invigorated with a new lease of purpose, and he said his next statement with a calm conviction. For the Emperor. Chapter 10 The Light. HIATUS Rain was not a particularly gifted Astropath. The few colleagues he had always seemed to outshine him both in talents and interpersonal relationships, resulting in him being mostly assigned to be the backup of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica chamber. Ironically, that might be the very reason he was spared from assassination. Unlike his unfortunate colleagues who were at their workstation, HIATUS was at his quarters when unknown assailants stormed the Telepathica chamber. An old reinforced panic room saved his life, and it took an inquisitor to convince him to come out from the hideout. Despite being mediocre in raw talent, HIATUS was not a foolish man. Even after being placed in a maximum security arrangement, a part of him was convinced he already was a dead man walking. The assassination of Astropath was a clear attempt to cut off the planet's connection to the wider Imperium, and as the old saying goes, disruption of communication can only mean one thing, a pending invasion. Further adding to his sense of ominous impending doom, HIATUS was unable to contact any other Imperial world for reinforcements for reasons unknown. By then the lone Astropath had expected the worst. Any moment now, he believed, hostile fleets bearing legions of the lost and damned would appear over a blackened sky to rain death and despair. Over the years of long service, he had caught glimpses of brief reports and tales to know such possibilities were real. Being the sole Astropath on the planet made him a marked individual, and even with all the securities provided, he felt his days were numbered. Then the strangest thing happened. Half a day ago, a massive psychic light shot up over the horizon. HIATUS knew that non-psychers could not see it, but to him, it was as if a new sun had risen. He should have been more afraid, but to his amazement, the light felt familiar to him, like meeting an old friend again but being unable to recall their name. By this time, he had already given up on contacting other Imperial worlds and was just happy to stare into the psychic light over the horizon to escape from his troubles. That huge silver-colored pillar of light with a hint of gold made him feel peaceful, and there was a strange sense of contentment knowing he witnessed this beautiful light before his inevitable demise. HIATUS was in such a mindset when Thabrus, the Inquisitor who saved his life, visited with two others. One was a female agent who he recognized to never mess with. The other female was a peculiar newcomer who was introduced as SYRINE. The Inquisitor soon left, dropping vague instructions before he did so. SYRINE was soon asking questions about his telepathic craft, something a sanctioned Astropath would never willingly share with any unfamiliar individuals. But at this point, HIATUS couldn't care less. Following the few recent unusual events, all sense of normality had gone out of the window for him. That said, the teaching experience was refreshing since he was able to share his craft freely with a stranger for the first time. The truth was he had no idea of what was going on anymore. SYRINE was not a psyker, he would know as psychers could easily tell one another apart from the rest of the mundane population. With that understanding, the futility of this exercise only served to further mystify him, as this was akin to teaching a jellyfish to run, but he enjoyed her company. Even as a blind psyker, HIATUS could tell SYRINE was a special individual. Her presence had a soothing effect on him, and her voice was pleasing. On top of that, she seemed very intelligent. The questions she asked from time to time cut right at critical points with a hint of a master's level of understanding. In the short time they spent together, his appreciation for her intellect went up a few notches. He imagined her to be beautiful but regretted not being able to see with his vision to verify that hunch. Then the lessons were halted for a meal as his hunger overcame his newfound thrill of teaching. SYRINE politely declined his invitation to join him, so he went for it alone. The servers came with his food. Everything was double-checked for poisons and toxins before he sat down to satisfy his hunger. Halfway through his meal, another unexpected event happened. Plus hello. Plus. SYRINE's voice came through via telepathic means. The strength and intensity of it startled him. Plus was that you? Lady SYRINE. Plus he sent back. Instantly he got a reply. This time the psychic communication came with overwhelming strength. It was akin to receiving a voice reply from a laud hailer while standing right next to it. The massive impact made HIATUS drop his eating utensils. Flinching, HIATUS quickly shot back another communication asking SYRINE to tone down the intensity of her message. Her next reply was an apology, and this time the volume was just right. What amazing raw talents his new student possessed, HIATUS thought. Only a few hours after his lessons and she mastered telepathic communication. Just as he was beginning to feel proud of his teachings, only then he remembered. SYRINE was not a psyker. That realization shattered the serenity HIATUS enjoyed that day. He felt like being rudely awakened from a sweet dream with haunting death cries of his former colleagues echoing inside his mind. Alarming questions raced one another for his attention as he instinctively took out his lost pistol. What sorcery is this? Is SYRINE an agent of the enemy? Is she a heretic that infiltrated this far to replace him from the inside? How can someone who is not a psyker send telepathic messages? His mind searched frantically and found no solid answers, and try as he might, he could not ignore the dark whispers of forbidden tales of demons nagging at the innermost corners of his mind. It was at this point HIATUS realized deep down, despite all the pessimism, he really did not want to die. By the time SYRINE came to check him up, he went into a full-blown panic and was ready to discharge his weapon despite his instincts screaming at him that it wouldn't do anything to his target. Then the female agent Neandra validated his guess of her skill by swiftly disarming him in a split second. To his surprise, she vouched for SYRINE's integrity. The commotion caused the stormtroopers who were in charge of his security to barge in. Even in a daze, HIATUS realized he would have been dead or incapacitated by now if either Neandra or SYRINE had ulterior motives, so he cooperated and convinced the security to leave. As the stormtroopers left, HIATUS was collecting his thoughts as he turned to his guests, and what he sensed made him freeze. SYRINE, once a mundane human presence in his psychic sense, began to change. First, she was suddenly registered as a psyker to his senses, making HIATUS wonder if he had gone senile. Then, to his utter bewilderment, he could feel her power growing rapidly. One moment, the level of raw power she exuded reminded him of his ancient mentor. Then that quickly changed as she surpassed that and reached the power level of a Primaris psyker he met years ago. But that too was surpassed, and her power just kept rising. With his jaw dropped, HIATUS witnessed SYRINE's transformation from being psychically inert to an overwhelming presence right before him. He felt the raw power difference between them and instantly understood that she could literally crush him like a bug if that level of psychic might was ever directed at him with intent to kill. Then, like a miracle, HIATUS could see SYRINE despite being blind. Her psychic presence was so intense that the powerful resonance between them made her appearance solidify to his psychic senses. Appearing before him was a breathtakingly beautiful human female wearing a simple white robe. Arm-length straight platinum hair flowed gently over her petite shoulders. The most striking feature she had were her large, almond-shaped eyes. Gray-colored irises with a tint of golden psychic glow were looking straight at him. HIATUS could feel the unfathomable power that lay behind them. Her gaze seemed to pierce through him but carried no malevolence. Looking closer, he noticed SYRINE was surrounded by a familiar faint golden light. That light, he murmured. Light? She echoed his statement. Then, as if just noticing the huge psychic pillar behind her that was shining from beyond the horizon, she turned and looked at it. Wordlessly, she raised a hand and then slowly began turning it around by her wrist. Responding to her action, the psychic light changed its intensity. Watching the unbelievable scene unfold, Aratus finally understood the truth. SYRINE was the link for that huge psychic beacon. She was the master of that light. Before he realized it, Aratus had dropped to his knees. Hot streams of tears flowed uncontrollably down his cheek. Emperor, preserve us. Who are you? His shaken voice was soft but clear in the quiet room. Such power, Aratus thought. SYRINE radiated so much power it reminded him of the legends he had heard of demons and saints about their otherworldly presence. Then to his utter horror, he recalled pointing a weapon at the individual before him. My sincerest, deepest apologies. I didn't know. Aratus pressed himself further down, his forehead touching the floor, his tears flowing down to the floor and his mind a panicking mess. Following the peculiar pattern that day, Aratus could not for his life understand what was going on, but one thing he knew for certain: whoever SYRINE was, taking his life was but a trivial matter for her. However, not only that did not happen, she instead knelt to his level to talk to him, asking for his assistance and reminding him of his duty to the Emperor while ignoring his transgressions. That deeply moved Aratus. He had personally known people who had lost their lives with much lesser acts of disrespect towards powerful individuals, let alone pointing a weapon and dropping accusations at such a figure. SYRINE had spared him. He was convinced of that fact. And who was he to begin with? A mediocre astropath who had given up on his duties and lost his faith in the Emperor. Such heretical thought, such sin. Yes, he will atone for his sins and his shameful actions later. Now is not the time for self-pity. Duty calls, and Aratus the astropath will answer it. He turned to SYRINE, astonished to find her presence had reverted back to a non-psyker again, but this time he knew better. When he probed hard enough, he could still just barely feel a hint of that unfathomable might beneath her benevolent aura. The fact that such a powerful figure was in front of him was proof enough that the God Emperor had yet to give up on this world. Aratus was sure of it. Now there was hope in his world, and that extended to this world as well. Stealing his resolve, Aratus replied the only way he could. Yes, he said, affirming himself to his duties with a level of resolve he had never felt in his entire life. For the Emperor,